Leonardo da Vinci actually left a lot of notebooks. He kept them all throughout his life. His notebooks were quite disorganized, and so there are quite a few books that try to collect his writings that have the same theme. And so I recently read a couple of those books. I made some notes. What I wrote was what I thought the most important just for me. One of the first notes that I have here is be curious. And if you know anything about Leonardo da Vinci, you know that he was extremely curious. He would study a ton of a woodpecker, and then he would study architecture for like bridges, and he would often do that on the same day. He was very observant, very curious, and the first note hence is be curious. If you're curious about stuff and you're passionate about it, obviously you're gonna be successful in your study. And this is one of the notes that I've taken down here. Study without zeal is almost useless. So if you're not curious about this topic that you're studying, if you're not passionate about it, it's almost useless. And a good example of studying without zeal is studying for school exams that you study, and once the exam passes, you don't have to keep that knowledge and it just goes away. Now the next couple notes are on knowledge, and he actually praised experience, empirical knowledge, and he really liked about himself that he wasn't a lettered man. He didn't have any formal education because he was an illegitimate son, which is probably serendipitous because he had, without formal education, he had more time to explore subjects that he was curious and passionate about. He had more time, more freedom to do so. So it's actually probably really fortunate for him and for us that he wasn't made to be a notary, to have formal education to become a notary, and he probably wouldn't be good at it. And he never learned, what was it, Greek or Latin or both. And a lot of works, you know, scientific works of that time were in those languages. But it's also fortunate because around that time they started printing those kind of classical works and new works, studies, treatises in Italian, which is the only language that he spoke. But also along his kind of scientific study and engineering studies, he also recognized that yes, theoretical knowledge is also important. So my note here is theoretical and practical knowledge go hand in hand. One without the other is useless. These are not his words, these are mine, but it's based on what he wrote. Also, this is, I think it's a quote: obtain knowledge first and then proceed to practice, which is born of knowledge. So there needs to be a balance between theory and practice. Learn theory and proceed to apply what you've learned, or base your practice on that theory. On success and fame and virtue, the first note that I have is be honest, which is pretty self-explanatory, you know. Then I have this quote here, or not quote, but a note: desire for more, bigger and better drives a person, and they must acknowledge that and make a conscious effort to be present. So because yes, obviously it's probably kind of biological incentive to strive for more, and this desire leaves us always unsatisfied, like we're never satisfied. So he thinks that we need to catch that and acknowledge that and try to be present in the moment. Then is also an interesting thought, which is virtue is our true wealth, and when a person dies, he will not be remembered for their material wealth, but for their character. And on success, he also said, he who is chained to a star does not change. Basically, if you are chained to a star, all the obstacles you will overcome. It's basically about perseverance. There isn't much that he wrote about health, but I quote, "If the soul is full of confusion and disorder, the body will be kept in disorder and confusion by the soul." But it's also important here that the body will be kept in disorder and confusion by the soul. So if you take care of your body but not your soul, it's not gonna benefit you. Also, he was a vegetarian. He did not want animals to suffer, and here is the quote that I also wrote down. "Now, does not nature produce enough vegetables for thee to satisfy thyself? And if thou art not content with vegetables, canst thou not by a mixture of them make infinite compounds?" So basically, he urged people to consider vegetarianism as their diet. It's interesting. You know, he lived like in the end of 15th century, the beginning of the 16th. So it's interesting that back then he was vegetarian and had those thoughts. And the last thing I wanna mention is his thoughts on art, but not really. I just wanna share this funny thing, because he would write kind of obsessively about about the fact that he thinks that painting is superior to poetry and sculpture. And he would write entry upon entry of like, poetry is not, like, it's just merely words, and you know, eyesight is the superior, the best of all the senses, so painting is better. And he would write continuously about, oh, poetry, you know, ain't nothing compared to painting, and sculpture also, like, there is light, it's like inferior form of painting. Basically, it's really just interesting that if you read one of those books about his journals, like there is a bunch of entries that are kind of obsessive, and there's the same. He had really strong opinions about sculpture and poetry and painting, and their places in the hierarchy of forms of art. Yes. So these are just interesting, you know, thought-provoking quotes that I wrote down. Thank you and bye.